Wow, look, this is evidence that he probably did kill JFK. Like, that's so fucking stupid. Like, oh yeah, he didn't plan it out?
He was assassinated on November 22nd, 1963. The accused assassin was a man named Lee Harvey Oswald. After being held in custody for less than 2 days, Oswald himself would meet a violent end.
One of the wildest parts about this is that, like, this was pinned on him being a communist sympathizer when it so clearly is not the case. It's like, oh yeah, he's a communist. Like, no, motherfucker, he was an asset. Like, how? It's one of the most obvious fucking pieces of information that the media has left out deliberately for the longest fucking time. Okay? Before this video starts, I'd like to say that no matter who shot it, the effects of that bullet to JFK's brain are nothing in comparison to what happens to my brain when a song gets stun locked and some dumb shit.
According to a subsequent investigation, Oswald had fired 3 rounds from the Texas schoolbook Depository. Police recovered 3 shell casings and a
an impossible shot. I think everybody knows that at this point.
Bolt-action rifle from the 6th floor of the building. But the shooting of Oswald sparked immediate suspicions of conspiracy. Suspicions that persist to this day and have driven most Americans to reject the government's conclusion that Oswald acted alone. The arguments for and against conspiracy take many shapes and forms. Far too many, in fact, to do them all justice in a...
They've recreated it multiple times? No, they have. Wait, what? Do you think it'll ever be declassified, the involvement of the CIA, etc.? No. No, they failed to recreate it. What are you talking about? Okay, let's just...
a single video. Instead, in this video, I want to zoom in and focus on a very narrow slice of this case. Specifically, the events surrounding the Texas schoolbook Depository. What exactly happened inside this building from where the shots that killed the president are believed to have been fired.
That video game
thing is so dumb. In 1963, a young man named Wesley Frazier received a call from an employment agency. There was a potential job opening at the Texas schoolbook Depository. On September the 13th, Frazier made his way from Irving, Texas, down to central Dallas. He met with Roy Truly, the superintendent of the building, and was hired on the spot. Back in Irving, Frazier lived with his older sister, Leanie Randall.
What? I'm definitely changing the station if you think the shot is impossible. All the bullet info makes complete sense, and you can listen to multiple doctors explain it. Could it still be CIA? Maybe, but Oswald shot him from that balcony. I thought the tree line absolutely covered it, and the 3 different fucking shots in sequence, in succession, in a matter of literal fucking seconds with a bolt action rifle made it straight up impossible. What are you talking about? What I am so like... Hasan's been eating too much red meat and cooked his brain. Okay, the video is going to tell us, but...
On the street lived a woman named Ruth Payne. On October the 14th, both Randall and Payne had a cup of coffee at the house of a neighbor. Payne brought along a friend and Russian immigrant named Marina Oswald, the wife of Lee Oswald. Marina could barely speak any English and had been staying with Payne for a few weeks, partly due to her husband's unemployment.
The subject of Lee looking for work and that he hadn't found work for a week came up while we were having coffee. And Mrs. Randall mentioned that her younger brother, Wesley Frazier, thought they needed another person at the Texas schoolbook Depository where Wesley worked.
Payne and Marina returned home, spoke with Roy Truly over the phone, and secured a job interview on behalf of Lee Oswald. The following morning, he went down to the book Depository and began his first day of work on October the 16th. So, an acquaintance with whom Oswald's wife was currently staying had a casual conversation with a neighbor. That neighbor happened to have a brother who recently got employed at the book depository. This prompted his wife to ask the acquaintance to call the superintendent of the building to inquire about any vacancies.
I told Mrs. Payne that to send Oswald down and I would talk to him, that I didn't have anything in mind for him of a permanent nature, but if he was suited, we could possibly use him for a brief time.
The position was not only temporary, but only existed due to a temporary shortage of staff.
It was the end of our fall rush. If it hadn't existed a week or 2 weeks longer, or if we had not been using some of our regular boys putting down this plywood floor, we would not have had any need for Lee Oswald at that time, which is a tragic thing for me to think about.
But it gets even more tragic because Oswald was not the only one to apply for a job.
I might have sent Oswald to work in a warehouse 2 blocks away. Oswald and another fellow reported for work on the same day, and I needed one of them for the depository building. I picked Oswald.
If Oswald was somehow entangled in a conspiracy, and the aim of that conspiracy was for him to become employed at the book depository, this roundabout sequence of events is a very strange way to go about it. As the name implies, the Texas School Book Depository.
You're reading too many conspiracy theories. The rifle used was tested in 1967 with various volunteers. CBS conducted a firing test at the H.P. White Ballistics Laboratory located in Street, Maryland. Many CBS 11 volunteer marksmen who, unlike Oswald, had no prior experience with the properly sighted Carcano, were able to hit the test target twice under the time allowed. Although they were all afforded multiple attempts and without the tension of an actual murder attempt, the only man who scored 3 hits was firearms examiner Howard Donahue from Maryland. For the test, 11 marksmen from diverse backgrounds were invited to participate. 3 Maryland State troopers, engineers. Oh, so they didn't actually, I get it. So they didn't actually conduct like a full-blown fucking firing test from the same circumstances. I don't know if this will cover it, but 6 months before the Kennedy assassination, Oswald tried to assassinate a far right-wing general named Edwin Walker. The round used in that attempt matched roughly the rounds used to assassinate Kennedy. One volunteer was unable to operate his rifle effectively, so the following statistics are based on the 10 remaining shooters. The first shooter led off the experiment was Al Sherman. The record of his effort, 5 seconds, 2 orange, 1 blue. All the shooters, Sherman was able to fire 8 rounds before his rifle jammed. Of all the shooters, the fastest times were 4.1 seconds, 4.3 seconds, 4.9 seconds, 5 seconds. The best accurate was 3 orange in 5.2 seconds. The rifles were oiled and allowed to cool down between shooters. CBS reporter Dan Rather attended this experiment. FBI conducted tests. He said it was a very accurate weapon. The targets we fired show that. Why does it matter if the shot is possible or not? I mean, it just plays another role. Like, it plays another role in a sea of conspiracies that surround why JFK was assassinated and how it happened. I mean, Lee Harvey Oswald being a fall guy or a patsy is I think, one of the most obvious circumstances. People say, like, oh, he was a sharpshooter and he could do it, but it's like one shooter being able to facilitate this at the time and place, especially when the original recreations did not prove to be so fruitful as chatters are claiming. Because, like, they'll do it in an isolated environment. They'll do it in a test environment. Can a Carcano rifle actually shoot 3 times in a row in rapid succession on a target? Sure. Okay. It was it was an incredibly difficult shot. Also, it doesn't even matter because like the shot was also being conducted by a guy who 100% was Navy intelligence and was absolutely like one of those subversive, the type of person that you put into communist groups specifically to gather intelligence on them and also, you know, disrupt the process of revolutionary organizing. Moving target that small, that like 3 times in a matter of seconds, ridiculous. Especially when you have to like also, ballistics don't matter. It motivates it's motives that are far more convincing. Like people make it seem like this is absolutely a fucking easy ass shot or something. Is this one of your favorite conspiracies? Yeah, their tests are not on non-moving targets. Like that's why I'm saying you can test this in a controlled environment to see if the gun is capable of doing such a thing. But that doesn't mean you're actually testing it in an identical circumstance. Like I said, it's a moving target. Okay? There's literally environmental factors. There's a reason why snipers also have a scout next to them when they're out in the field and they're operating in modern context at least. And the guns that they're using are significantly better than those old ass fucking rifles, especially the one that he was using. So you need a spotter to like look at the fucking wind and figure out distance. I mean, come the fuck on. Oswald kills 2 days after he killed Kennedy. Please use logic. It's so incredibly obvious there was a gang within the State Department that wanted Kennedy dead for so many different reasons. This shit's going to get declassified one day and everyone's going to surprise Pikachu phase. Steven Crowder recreated the assassination on his bracket. Okay, stop. All right, let's continue.
Depository was in the business of selling books. For $1.25 an hour, Oswald's job was to prepare the books for shipping. He did so by filling out forms and transporting cartons of books between the upper floors and the first. The building had 3 elevators, 2 staircases, and was 7 stories tall. In the northwest corner, 1 stairway and 2 freight elevators provided access to all 7 floors. A small passenger elevator near the front entrance stopped at level 4, while stories 1 and 2 were connected by a second flight of stairs. Lacking a driver's license, Oswald relied on Wesley Frazier to carpool between Irving and Dallas every Friday evening and Monday morning. He spent workdays at a rooming house in Dallas while spending the weekends with his wife and daughters in Irving. But on Thursday morning, November the 21st, the day before the assassination, Oswald decided to deviate from this routine.
I was standing there on the first floor getting the orders in, and Lee said, "Could I ride home with you this afternoon?" And I said, "Sure, you know, like I told you. You can go home with me anytime you want to. Like I say, anytime you want to go see your wife, that is all right with me." Lee had never gone home in the middle of the week before, so I asked him why, and he stated that he was going home to get some curtain rods for his apartment. I asked if he was going home on Friday as well, and he said no.
Frazier drove Oswald back to Irving, where he arrived unannounced at the household of Ruth Payne. Both Payne and Marina were surprised to see Oswald on a Thursday. They assumed he'd come to make amends with Marina due to an argument they had had a few days before.
Did your husband give any reason for coming home on Thursday?
He said that he was lonely because he hadn't come the preceding weekend and he wanted to make his peace with me.
Was anything said about curtain rods or his taking curtain rods to town the following day?
No, I didn't have any.
He didn't say anything like that?
No.
The next day, Oswald said goodbye to his wife and left the Payne residence about 7:15. Atop a dresser in the bedroom, he left behind his wedding ring. Oswald was next seen walking down the street by Lenny Randall, carrying a package. He was soon joined by Frazier, and the two of them took a seat in his car to begin their commute.
When you got in the car, did you say anything to Oswald, or did he say anything to you?
I noticed there was a package lying on the back seat. I didn't pay too much attention, and I said, "What's the package, Lee?" And he said, "Curtain rods." And I said, "Oh yes, you told me you were going to bring some today."
Not only was Oswald carrying a large package, but he'd forgotten to bring a lunch bag.
When he rode with me, I say he always brought lunch, except that one day on November 22nd. He didn't bring his lunch that day. Right when I got in the car, I asked him where was his lunch, and he said he was going to buy his lunch that day.
They arrived in Dallas a few minutes before 8 o'clock. Typically, they would walk together from the parking lot to the book depository. But on this particular Friday, Oswald grabbed his curtain rods and rushed ahead into the building. Working on the ground floor, in view of the rear entrance, was their colleague, Jack Doherty.
Did you see Oswald come to work that morning?
Yes, when he first came into the door.
Did he have anything in his hands or arms?
Well, not that I could see of.
Frazier and Doherty are the only two people known to have seen Oswald entering the building. Frazier says he was carrying a package. Doherty says he was not. Contradictions like this one will become a recurring theme throughout the rest of this video. We'll take a closer look at the missing curtain rods in a later chapter, but for now, let's stay with Oswald. As the morning progressed, Oswald was seen working as normal. Roy Truly described him as an above-average worker who mostly kept himself. In fact, he was a bit of a mystery to his colleagues.
On the way back and forth between Irving and Dallas, did you talk very much to each other?
No, sir, not very much. He was one of these types that just didn't talk.
I was acquainted with Lee Oswald during the time he was employed at the book depository, but I never did get to know him well. He did not mix with the other employees and did not appear to want to make friends with me or any of the others.
Did you ever speak to Oswald?
Yes, sir.
Did he ever speak to you?
No, sir.
He never replied to you?
No, sir.
Would you say he was unfriendly?
Yes, sir, I would.
But there were exceptions to his reticence, and one of them occurred on this Friday morning. James Jarman was working on the ground floor when he observed Oswald staring at the window facing Elm Street.
Oswald was standing up in the window, and I went to the window also, and he asked me, what were people gathering around the corner for? And I told him that the president was supposed to pass in the morning, and he asked me did I know which way he was coming. And I told him, yes, he'll probably come down Main and turn on Houston and then back again on Elm. Then he said,
damn, this guy helped him assassinate the president, which he very clearly shot all the shots at and very clearly shot and killed him with from that corner, that window.
oh, I see. And that was all.
It's a brief yet fascinating moment.
Yeah, you know what's fascinating? Yeah, dude. Even if that's supposed to be a wow, look, this is evidence that he probably did kill JFK. Like, that's so fucking stupid. Like, oh yeah, he didn't plan it out. He didn't plan it out ahead of time. He just like found out that day. He just happened to have his fucking rifle with him that he brought. And then, you know, good day to do a fucking assassination.
It almost seems as though Oswald had no idea that Kennedy would pass by the book depository. This was indeed the case for some of his colleagues. Jarman himself had only been made aware of the fact shortly before he spoke with Oswald. There's no doubt that Oswald knew the president was coming to Dallas, but whether he knew the route of the motorcade is much more difficult to prove. The route of the motorcade had only been finalized a few days before the visit and hinged upon its destination. Kennedy was supposed to attend a banquet in Dallas.
I'm sorry, this has probably been asked to you tons of times today, but have you or do you intend to cover Kick severing ties with Aiden Ross and ending his contract with them? First of all, this is the first time I'm hearing of this. Secondly, I don't care. And lastly, it's probably not even real, and you got debated by some literal dumbass fucking Aiden Ross dick riding account that made a joke. You saw it and you took it seriously. I don't even know any of the details, but I almost am telling you with a certainty that that is what happened, most likely.
But no one could agree on a venue. It came down to two options: the Trade Mart northwest of downtown or the Women's Building to the east. One of the more vocal proponents of the trade mart was Texas Governor John Connally, and after much back and forth, he finally got his way on November the
Don't be embarrassed. Just, you know, think a little bit more critically next time.
14th. Had the women's building been selected, the motorcade would have sped through Dealey Plaza, east on Main Street, significantly further away and perpendicular to the book depository. Not to mention that First Lady Jacqueline would have been seated between the building and the president. The selection of the trade mart meant that the motorcade would now head west on Main Street and make these turns through Dealey Plaza to reach the northbound lanes on the freeway. Now, these turns could still have been avoided had the motorcade continued like so and not taken the freeway, but since the freeway was the more scenic and expedient route, it was the more attractive choice. All of that is to say, the success of the assassination was largely dependent upon the selection of the trade mart. It might therefore be tempting to cast suspicion upon Governor Connally, but it should be noted that he rode in the presidential limousine along with the Kennedys and suffered grave injuries during the shooting. Not only that, but Connally was actually opposed to a motorcade and favored a more direct route from the airport to the trade mart, a brief trip that would have bypassed Dealey Plaza altogether. He was unfortunately overruled by Kennedy himself, who wanted to see and be seen by the people of Dallas. Okay, so all that was happening behind the scenes, but as far as the public was aware, there wasn't even going to be a motorcade. As
Car-centric infrastructure killed JFK. That's awesome.
late as November the 15th, the Dallas Morning News reported that a motorcade seemed unlikely. But the very next day, the parade was finally confirmed. While the precise route followed by maps and detailed descriptions was not officially disclosed until November the 19th, someone familiar with Dallas could have approximated the route a few days in advance. That is to say, the earliest point a member of the public could have deduced that Kennedy would be driven past the book depository was November the 16th, less than a week before the visit. There's a good chance that Oswald saw these articles because he'd been observed reading political columns in the very same newspapers. Furthermore, we know from other aspects of Oswald's life that he was politically inclined.
Well, I have studied Marxist philosophy, yes, sir, and also other philosophers.
But are you a Marxist? I think you did admit on an earlier radio interview that you consider yourself a Marxist.
Well, I would very definitely say that I am a Marxist. That is correct. But that does not mean, however, that I'm a communist.
What is the difference between the two?
Well, there's a great deal of difference. Several American parties in several countries are based on Marxism, such as Ghana. Certain countries have characteristics of a socialist system, such as Great Britain with its socialized medicine. These, then, are the differences between an outright communist country and countries which adhere to leftist or Marxist principles.
Conversely,
Typical misunderstanding of Marxism. He was a debate lord? He was a CIA agent? Yes, he was.
a lack of interest in politics is precisely why at least one of Oswald's colleagues remained oblivious to the motorcade. So while it's understandable for someone apolitical to be taken off guard by a presidential visit, it makes far less sense for someone like Oswald.
On November 21st, the day before the assassination that you were describing, was there any discussion between you and your husband about President Kennedy's trip or proposed trip to Texas, Dallas, and the Fort Worth area?
I asked Lee whether he knew where the president would speak and told him that I would very much like to hear him and to see him. I asked him how this could be done, but he said he didn't know how to do that and didn't enlarge any further on the subject.
Had there ever been...
This was also somewhat unusual, his lack of desire to talk about that subject any further.
How did you think it was unusual? Could you explain that?
The fact that he didn't talk a lot about it. He merely said something as an answer and did not have any further comments.
Do you mean by that, usually he would discuss a matter of that kind and show considerable interest?
Yes, of course. He would have told me who would be there and where this would take place.
We'll never know what Oswald was thinking when he spoke with James Jarman shortly before the assassination. But it is worth repeating, though, that Oswald was hired on October the 15th. That's a full month before the motorcade route had been decided, let alone announced to the public.
Dude, sometimes it just clicks. You know what I'm saying? You got a Marxist guy who is just like very upset at JFK, right? And he wants to do this for communism. You know, he wants to just assassinate JFK for communism. And like, wow, look at that. Lo and behold, he was literally right place, right time, brought his fucking curtain rods, AKs, his rifle. And he just, you know, was really fucking good at shooting. Like, really fucking good.
On the morning of November the 22nd, a handful of employees had been assigned to install a new plywood floor on the 6th floor of the book depository. Every once in a while, they would catch a glimpse of Oswald.
I saw Lee Oswald shortly before lunchtime. He was by himself with a piece of paper in his hand. I had nothing to say to him, but some of the other male employees teased him and told him he ought to go get a haircut. Lee Oswald just laughed at this remark.
Shortly before noon, it was time for lunch. For a bit of fun, they decided to race the 2 elevators down to ground level. As they began descending, they observed Oswald now standing on the 5th floor. He shouted for them to stop or to close the gate to the elevator upon reaching the 1st floor. Charles Givens then realized he'd forgotten his jacket and cigarettes up on the 6th floor. About to return to ground level, Givens spotted Oswald approaching.
Lee was coming from the window up front where the shots.
The pic of him has him holding a Stalinist and a Trotskyist newspaper with his rifle. No real communist would be a fan of both. Also, every other interaction that he has with like leftist works, quite literally, is him trying to rile up people in a fight, or trying to rile up like actual organizers and communists. Man, listening to you be so misinformed about this is making me question if you bullshit everything you talk about. He lived in Russia. Okay. Yeah. I'm so confused. Okay. What is that? You know who else went to Russia for their honeymoon? Bernie Sanders, but that doesn't even mean anything. Bernie Sanders was actually sympathetic to socialism, whereas plenty of fucking people that lived in Russia and were easily able to come back into the United States of America were, guess what? Assets for the State Department. But I don't really understand.
Were fired from.
Did you watch where he walked to?
Well, no, sir. I didn't pay much attention. I was getting ready to get on the elevator, and I say, "Boy, are you going downstairs?"
What did he say to you?
I say, "It's near lunchtime," and he said, "No, sir. When you get downstairs, close the gate to the elevator." That meant the elevator on the west side. You can pull both gates down, and it'll come up by itself.
What else did he say?
That is all. I said, "Okay," and got on the elevator.
And with that, Givens became the last person inside the book depository known to have seen Oswald before the assassination. At least, that's the official story. The encounter was fixed at 11:55, more than half an hour before the shooting. But other employees claim to have seen Oswald in other parts of the building around the same time or even later than Givens. Givens himself provided conflicting accounts. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This encounter notwithstanding, Givens was not the last person to visit the 6th floor. Shortly after Givens had left, Bonnie Williams grabbed his lunch and went upstairs. He sat down right about here to await the president's arrival.
Now, when you were sitting by the window, could you see down towards the southeast corner?
No, sir. I couldn't see anything as I remember there. About the only thing that I could see from there would be the top edge of the window because the boxes were stacked up.
Did you see anyone else up there that day?
No, I did not.
The southeast corner is the location from where the shots that killed the president are believed to have been fired. the so-called sniper's nest.
I still want to know what that one chatter implied, like about Lee Harvey Oswald living in Russia. Like, did he respond at all? He just said, like, you're so dumb because you seem nervous. Yeah. It's because I'm the one who killed JFK.
Williams says he was alone, but admits his view was obstructed by tall stacks of boxes. Meanwhile, down by the main entrance, someone was attempting to gain access to the building.
I met an elderly white man at the entrance of the building who asked me to direct him to a restroom. The man was very old and feeble and could hardly make it up the steps. About 5 minutes later, I saw this man leave the building and enter an old Buick automobile with 3 elderly white women. The Buick then drove away.
Did you see him talk to anyone in the building?
No, he went straight out.
This individual was never identified and is the only unknown person known to have entered the book depository before the shooting. After finishing his lunch up on the 6th floor, Bonnie Williams heard the voices of James Jarman and Harold Norman emanating from the floor below. Feeling a bit lonely, Williams went down to the 5th floor and joined his 2 colleagues. The exact time of Williams' departure is unclear, but it was likely no more than 10 or even 5 minutes before the shooting. On the grounds below, a sea of spectators lined the streets of Elm in Houston. Every once in a while, one of them would glance up at the book depository. Indeed, Jarman, Williams, and Norman were spotted on multiple occasions, leaning out the far east windows on the 5th floor. But movement could also be seen on the floor above them, a floor that, by all accounts, was now supposed to be empty. Awaiting the motorcade by the east curb of Houston was a young, newlywed couple named Arnold and Barbara Rowland. Some 15 minutes before the shooting, Arnold spotted a white man in the westernmost window.
Like, okay, as far as conspiracy theories goes, right, there's some that are purposely left unanswered. And I am an entertainer of certain conspiracy theories, specifically ones that revolve around 9/11. And like, agencies not communicating with one another, CIA assets being able to like get flight training in the continental United States of America, things of that nature. This has been answered. No, it hasn't. No, this is yet another circumstance where like, I know that when people talk about like conspiracy theories, they're like, oh, like Wayfair is trafficking children on their websites. Like that shit's dumb as fuck. You have to bring in a lot of goddamn normies to be involved in a circumstance like this. If you're using like the website Wayfair, okay, that's not how trafficking happens, okay? Whereas when it comes down to something like this, it is very viable. It is incredibly it's more likely that it is conducted by it's conducted by the CIA and executed by the CIA.
Window on the 6th floor of the book depository. The man was holding a rifle, his gaze locked at Houston. Despite standing a few meters away from an officer, Arnold chose not to report the gunman.
Did it ever enter your mind that you should go and tell the policeman of this sight or this vision that you had seen?
Really, it didn't.
It never entered your mind?
I never dreamed of anything such as that. I mean, I must honestly say, my opinion was based on movies I have seen, on the attempted assassination of Theodore Roosevelt and the other one, Franklin Roosevelt. And both of these had Secret Service men up in windows or on top of the buildings with rifles. And this is how my opinion was based and why it didn't alarm me. Perhaps if I had been older and had more experience in life, it might have made a difference. It very well could have. Do you ever have reoccurring dreams, sir?
What?
Do you ever have reoccurring dreams?
Yes.
This is a reoccurring dream of mine, sir. All the time. What if I told someone about it? I knew about it enough in advance, and perhaps it could have been prevented. I mean, this is something which shakes me up at times.
If Roland's recollection is accurate, it stands in direct conflict with that of Bonnie Williams, who claimed to have eaten lunch on the same floor at the same time. Williams neither saw nor heard anyone, despite having an unobstructed view down to the southwest corner of the building where Roland claimed to have seen the gunman. A few minutes later, a different spectator named Howard Brennan spotted a white man pacing to and fro the easternmost window on the 6th floor. At 12:30, the presidential limousine emerged from behind a building and began driving north on Houston. As the car made a sharp left turn at Elm, a high school student named Amos Ewens glanced up at the book Depository and caught sight of a protruding metal rod.
So that's look. So this is the interesting part. He has if I'm not mistaken, right? He has a clear line of sight here, and only chooses to take action as he's passing through the tree. As he's passing through the tree line, where his vision is actually impaired. So that also is another reason why it's like very odd.
A protruding metal rod. Few realized what had happened. Was it a firecracker, backfiring motorcycle, or presidential salute? People near the Rolands even started laughing, perhaps feeling a bit foolish for being frightened by the ostensibly harmless explosion. Standing.
What? Hit this shot. Cars moving at a constant rate. Once you have a bead, you can follow him. Hit this shot myself in DOD/COD. Please tell me that's like an actual terminology for something that I don't know about and not fucking Call of Duty. No, no way. It's got to be like a term or something, right? That we don't understand.
By the northwest corner of Elm in Houston was James Worrell. He thought the explosion had come from directly overhead. Sure enough, on one of the upper floors, Worrell could see the barrel of a gun. At that moment, a second explosion echoed through Dealey Plaza. Worrell and Ewens witnessed the recoil and muzzle flash of the rifle in concurrence with the sound. Brennan had yet to realize what was happening. He thought a firecracker had been thrown from the book Depository. He looked up, and the man he'd seen pacing only minutes before was now aiming down the sights of a rifle.
It's not known for sure, but it is believed that President Kennedy has been shot.
President Kennedy and Texas Governor John Connally shot by an assassin today in Dallas, Texas.
Brennan could only recall hearing 2 shots, but his testimony implies he might have heard 3. He confusingly said he saw the gunman fire the last shot, yet denied seeing the discharge of the rifle. In the immediate aftermath of the shooting, the rifle was seen by a handful of witnesses as the gunman cautiously withdrew from the window.
The rifle, or what looked like a rifle, was drawn fairly slowly back into the building, and I saw no one in the window with it. I didn't even see a form in the window.
I could see his hand, you know, the rifle laying across his hand. And I could see his hand sticking out on the trigger part. After he got through, he just pulled it back in the window.
He drew the gun back from the window, as though he was drawing it back to his side, and maybe paused for another second, as though to assure himself that he hit his mark, and then he disappeared.
Neither Ewens nor Worrell saw the face of the gunman and could thus offer little to no information regarding his appearance. Arnold was quite some distance away, yet furnished a basic description of the man he'd seen about a quarter of an hour before the shooting, a description that was quite similar to the one provided by Brennan, who got the best look at the gunman. Taken together, these accounts paint a picture of an assassin on the 6th floor of the book Depository.
So many goddamn contradictions in these accounts. It's hilarious. I mean, to be fair, eyewitness testimony is really, really bad. It is notoriously bad. So That's not surprising. Plus, a lot of these are not even all that controversial.
Taking aim with a rifle and firing at the president from the sniper's nest. But other accounts leave room for a bit of doubt. As previously mentioned, Arnold Roland spotted a white man with a rifle in the westernmost window on the 6th floor about 12:15. But as late as 5 minutes before the shooting, Arnold observed an elderly black man leaning out the easternmost window on the same floor. He might have confused the 6th floor with the 5th, where James Jarman, Bonnie Williams and Harold Norman did indeed lean out the windows. In fact, they were the only black employees known to have watched the motorcade from a floor above the 1st. Except they could hardly be described as elderly. But then, take a listen to this.
Will you describe with as much particularity as you can what that man looked like?
It seemed to me an elderly black man. That is about all. I didn't pay very much attention to him.
This question was then repeated to Arnold a few minutes later, at which point his answer had dramatically changed.
He was very thin, an elderly gentleman, bald or practically bald, very thin hair if he wasn't bald. Had on a plaid shirt, I think it was red and green, very bright color, that is why I remember it.
Can you give us an estimate as to age?
50, possibly 55 or 60.
Can you give us an estimate as to height?
5'8", 5'10", in that neighborhood. He was very slender, very thin.
Can you give us a more definite description as to complexion?
Very dark or fairly dark. Not real dark compared to some black men, but fairly dark. Seemed like his face was either, I can't recall detail, but it was either very wrinkled or marked in some way.
So, in the span of a few minutes, Arnold went from "I didn't pay very much attention" to describing the man's complexion, hair, clothing, age, height, build, and even the blemishes on his face.
Sometimes some people are prone to exaggerate more than others, and without in any way meaning to take away from the testimony of your husband as to what he saw in the building at the time, just from your general experience, do you feel you can rely on everything that your husband says?
I don't feel that I can rely on everything anybody says.
Well, this is really an unfair question for me to ask any wife about her husband, and I am not asking it very correctly, but...
At times, my husband is prone to exaggerate. Does that answer it?
I think it does. Is there anything else you want to add to that, or not?
Usually, his exaggerations are not concerned with anything other than himself. They're usually to boost his ego. They usually say that he is really smarter than he is, or he's a better...
Damn, Barbara, you fucking ripped your husband a new one, dude. God damn. She's like, he fucking has a small penis, too. Yeah, put that on the goddamn record, okay? You understand? He lies about that, too. He keeps saying 4 inches is fine. One day, while he's sleeping, I took the goddamn ruler to his penis, pulled it all the way out, stretched it out. Let me tell you, 3.5.
Salesman than he is. Something like that.
As leading as that line of questioning was, Barbara was not alone in doubting her husband's credibility. Officials at 2 separate high schools attended by Arnold explicitly warned authorities not to trust everything he says. He was characterized as someone who would not hesitate to fabricate a story and not tell the truth regarding any matter. Indeed, Roland lied or exaggerated on multiple occasions when he testified. Another witness who claimed to have seen a gunman in the book Depository was Carolyn Walter. Shortly before the arrival of the motorcade, Walter had seen a man with blonde or light brown hair in one of these windows on the 4th or 5th floor. She explicitly ruled out the 6th. It should be noted, however, that during the shooting, this window was closed with the blinds down, while this one, as you already know, was occupied by Bonnie Williams and Harold Norman. In any case, the light-haired man seen by Walter was holding a machine gun, and standing beside him was another man wearing a brown suit. Much like Arnold Roland, Walter assumed the gunman was a presidential guard and refrained from telling the police. In fact, there's no evidence she told anyone of what she'd seen, not even the colleague with whom she watched the motorcade. In Walter's defense, 2 other witnesses recalled seeing a man with light or light brown hair on the 5th or 6th floor, except they never saw a weapon nor an accomplice. Disagreements regarding the floors were at least in part due to the ground floor lacking visible windows.
How do you know it was the 6th floor? 6th floor rather than the 5th floor?
I went with the FBI and I showed them the window, and I didn't count the bottom floor.
You mean the first time you gave a statement, you didn't count the bottom floor?
That's right.
Another source of confusion was the distinct visual difference between the 7th floor and the ones below.
When you first glance at the building, you're thrown off a little as to the floors because there's a ridge. It almost looks like a structure added onto the top of the building, about 1 story above. So you have to recount.
Not only that, but multiple witnesses described the 6th floor as the 2nd floor from the top. But in the chaos that ensued, it seems the tail end of that sentence was not always recorded. Amos Ewens is another curious witness because even though he never saw the gunman's face, he did see the top of his head. Somehow.
What did you see in the building?
I saw a bald spot on this man's head. Trying to look out the window, he had a bald spot on his head. I was looking at the bald spot.
Oswald did not have a bald spot. He was thinning a bit in the front, but otherwise had a full head of hair. But the strength of Ewens' account is somewhat diminished by his inability to recall much of anything else.
Could you tell whether he was a black gentleman or a white man?
No, sir.
Couldn't even tell that, but you have described that he had a bald
spot in his head. Yes, sir. I could see the bald spot in his head.
Now, could you tell what color hair he had?
No, sir.
Could you tell whether his hair was dark or light?
No, sir.
Long after the assassination, 15 years to be precise, a journalist working for the Dallas Morning News tracked down a man named Johnny Powell. Powell had supposedly seen 2 men fiddling with a scope on a rifle in the sniper's nest. He described their complexion as darker than white, but that was about it. Once again, one has to wonder if he confused the gunmen with Jarman, Williams and Norman on the floor below. I mean, after 15 years of silence, there's no telling how Powell's memory could have been distorted. A good example of such distortion is Richard Carr. A few minutes before the shooting, Carr had been standing roughly here when he spotted a man on the 7th floor of the book Depository, all the way over here. The man was white and wore a hat, glasses and sport coat. In the immediate aftermath of the shooting, Carr returned to ground level and caught sight of what he believed to be the same man now trotting south on Houston. He made a left turn right about here before being picked up by a station wagon. By 1969, however, Carr's story had notably changed. The man with a sport coat had now been standing on the 5th floor, not the 7th. After the shooting, Mr. Sportcoat had emerged from behind the book depository, accompanied by 2 other men. They too had been picked up by a separate station wagon before speeding away. It's unclear how Carr is supposed to have seen all of this, considering what he told the FBI back in '64.
Carr advised that from his location on the steel structure of the new courthouse building, it would have been impossible for him to observe the lower floors and entrance of the book depository, and that from his position,
James Worrell had seen a man emerge from a sport, wore a hat. Anyone?
Mr. Romack stated under his immediate time he heard the shots, he had looked.
Did I accidentally go forward or backwards?
Unclear how Carr is supposed to have seen all of this, considering what he told the FBI back in '64.
Sorry.
Carr advised that from his location on the steel structure of the new courthouse building, it would have been impossible for him to observe the lower floors and entrance of the book depository, and that from his position he could only see the top floor and the roof.
In Carr's defense, James Worrell had seen a man emerge from the rear entrance of the book depository about 3 minutes after the shooting. This man also wore a sport coat and headed south on Houston. Except the man seen by Carr was kinda stocky and wore a hat, while the man seen by Worrell had a slender build and was hatless. Besides, anyone connected with the shooting, leaving via the rear entrance, would surely have headed north, not towards the scene of the crime. As if that was not enough, 2 other witnesses, James Romack and George Rackley, stood roughly here for several minutes after the shooting. Both of them paid special attention to the rear entrance of the building.
Mr. Romack stated that from the time he heard the shots, he had looked toward the book depository and had under his immediate observation the loading dock and the back door. He stated he is positive that no one came out of this door or out of the loading dock doors.
Could you see the back door of the Texas School Book Depository?
Yes.
Were you looking towards that direction?
Yes, sir.
About how long did you keep your eyes fixed over there?
Oh, I would say 5 minutes anyhow. Probably 10. I was looking up that way at all times.
Did you see any people leave the Texas School Book Depository by way of the rear exit?
No, sir.
Did you see any people running north on Houston Street?
No, sir.
Unfortunately, conflicting accounts were not limited to the book Depository. Among the hundreds of witnesses in the vicinity of Dealey Plaza, nothing was as disputed as the number and origin of the gunshots.
And Governor Conley was holding his stomach.
And the shots were almost simultaneously, weren't they?
Yes, sir. They were probably 10 seconds apart.
Do you know who fired the third shot?
I didn't hear a third. I don't recall a third shot. There may have been. My family hit the ground, and I don't recall a third shot. I just couldn't. I'm not certain of that. I do know I heard 2 shots.
Yeah, I heard 3. I know there were 3.
Well,
yeah, I said to Jerry after the second shot, I said, my God, those are gunshots.
No one knows exactly how many spectators were in or near Dealey Plaza at the time of the assassination. Well over 200 were at some point questioned by a combination of authorities, journalists, and others.
Like that, the trees, for the record, people saying like the trees did not impact his line of sight. I'm pretty sure they did. They asked the same man the same question 5 minutes later, and he always was 8 shots. It doesn't matter. No, he had a clear shot when the car was turning over, but he didn't shoot then. He shot after the car changed, after the car started going down this street, which people will say it's because if he shot right here when he had a clear line of sight, they would have immediately caught him. Well, guess what? You know, he's shooting the motherfucking president, okay? At that point, it's like, you're probably not going to get away, dog. You know what I mean? So it didn't really matter too much, did it? Now, the other thing that is also stupid about this is when you say, oh, well, if you shot him here, then the car would go forward and would completely, and, you know, he would not be able to shoot him at all if he missed his shot. Well, turns out it didn't even matter because he shot him through the fucking tree line. He shot him through the fucking trees. He was such an OP shot that he was able to do it here. Not to mention he blew off his dome from the back, so his position of waiting for a spot makes 0 sense. People knew immediately. Anyway, but once again, it's a dumb conversation to have, especially when you look at eyewitness testimony, because eyewitness testimony, especially in a fucking insane situation like watching the president's brains fucking explode right in front of your eyes, is always going to lead to horrifyingly inconclusive eyewitness testimony, because you're in a panic mode at that point. Like, you can't fucking figure out what the hell you're looking at. Come on now. You know what I mean? Like, at the top of the hour, you're fucking panicking because you probably think a 3-minute ad break is coming, and you'd be right. But, of course, you should not panic at the top of the hour as long as you're subscribed for $5 or free with a Twitch Prime by connecting your Amazon Prime account to your Twitch account. You get 1 free Prime subscription a month. Use it on your favorite broadcaster. What is this cake? R/Place 2023 cake? What the fuck does that mean? Got a piece of JFK's brain matter on your lip you would lick? Would you lick? What the fuck? Yo! Oh, I want to throw up. Why did you say that? Oh, God. Oh, God. The 3-minute ad break. 34 MKD50. Thank you for the 50 big ones. Jesus Christ.
Attempts have been made to consolidate the various accounts, and it's clear from all such attempts that the
CIA, this man right here.
3 shots. What's a bit
right
less
there.
clear is the source of the explosions. The gunman was either placed in the vicinity of the book depository, marked here in red, or an area west of the building, marked in green, known as the grassy knoll. But as you can see from these pie charts, the assessment of earwitness testimony is highly susceptible to bias. It's a surprisingly subjective exercise that can lead to widely different results. Nevertheless, there were a substantial number of witnesses who pointed to the grassy knoll located roughly here, and many of them were scattered throughout the plaza. To give you some examples, August Campbell was standing near the front entrance of the book.
One thing we know is that George H.W. Bush was not at the grassy knoll. He was, however, in Dallas. He just didn't know what he was doing on that day, okay? On that wonderful occasion, on that wonderful day. He just cannot recall what he was doing there, but he certainly was not at the grassy knoll.
Book depository, yet believed the shots had come from the grassy knoll. Meanwhile, Marilyn Sitzman was standing on the grassy knoll, yet believed the shots had come from the book depository. Standing beside Campbell was a woman named Geraldine Reed, who believed the shots had come from the book depository. Standing by the curb in front of Sitzman was William Newman, who believed the shots had come from the grassy knoll. One might therefore conclude that there must have been two assassins, one in the book depository and one on the grassy knoll. Indeed, countless authors and even a congressional investigation have done precisely that. Now, the scope of this video is not nearly exhaustive enough for me to attempt any conclusions regarding a second gunman, but I do want to leave you with this. You might have seen these unlabeled blue slices before. Well, that's how many witnesses heard gunshots coming from multiple directions. That is to say, next to no one did. All the shots came either from the east or west, not both.
Mr. Campbell believed the noise came from away from the book depository. This illusion, he explained, may have been due to the sound bouncing off the building and other objects in the vicinity.
That does make sense for the record. I'm not even kidding. Like the bullet sounds would echo. I don't think that's that suspicious for people to not be able to exactly trace, especially if they're not like trained people. They're not going to be able to figure out exactly where the shots are coming from.
Campbell was far from alone in being deceived by the pronounced echoes of the gunshots.
Where did the noises or shots sound to you like they came from?
It was hard to tell because they had an echo, you know. There was actually two explosions with each one. There was the shot and then the echo from it. So it was hard to tell. There was too much reverberation. There was an echo which gave me a sound all over. In other words, that square is it had a sound all over. The sounds came either from up against the school depository building or near the mouth of the triple underpass. I had worked in this watchtower for some 10 or 12 years and was there during the time they were renovating the school depository building, and had noticed at that time the similarity of sounds occurring in either of those two locations. There is a reverberation which takes place from either location.
This auditory illusion was not a fluke. Not only did the buildings surrounding Dealey Plaza act as an echo chamber, but even experienced hunters can struggle to pinpoint the number and origin of gunshots by sound alone. Here's a quote from a book on that very topic, published a few years before the assassination.
Little credence should be put in what anyone says about a shot or even the number of shots. These things coming upon a person suddenly are generally extremely inaccurately recorded in their memory.
I don't disagree with that.
One of the authors asked one deer hunter last fall how many shots another hunter less than 100 yards away had fired. The answer was 5. Actually, only 2 shots were fired.
Employees in the book depository were no less confused about the gunshots than the spectators outside. To give you some examples, on the first floor, Eddie Piper heard 3 shots that appeared to come from inside the building. On the third floor, Edna Case and Sandra Ellison heard nothing. Meanwhile, Stephen Wilson on the same floor heard 3 shots, came from the west. On the fourth floor, Elsie Dorman, multiple shots came from this building across the street. Victoria Adams, 3 shots from the west. Mary Hollis, 3 shots inside the building. But some employees not only heard the shots, but could literally feel the explosions shake the building.
Could you tell where the shots were coming from?
Yes, sir. They came from inside the building.
How do you know that?
Because the building vibrated from the result of the explosion coming in.
Did you know they were shots at the time?
Yes, sir. They sounded almost like cannon shots. They were so terrific.
Much like Geneva Hine on the second floor, Bonnie Williams could feel the explosions up on the fifth. It sounded to Williams as though the shots had been fired from the floor above. His colleague, James Jarman, initially thought the shots had come from somewhere below, but then changed his mind and agreed with Williams. Harold Norman, meanwhile, heard far more than gunshots.
Just after the president passed by, I heard a shot. And several seconds later, I heard 2 more shots. I knew that the shots had come from directly above me, and I could hear the expended cartridges fall to the floor. I could also hear the bolt action of the rifle.
The explosions shook the building, and a piece of loose plaster or dirt was dislodged from the ledge above and struck Williams in the head. Meanwhile, spectators on the streets below could see them leaning out the windows, looking up at the 6th floor.
I just looked straight up ahead of me, which would have been looking at the school book depository, and I noticed 2 black men in a window, straining to see directly above them, and my eyes followed right up to the window above them, and I saw the rifle, or what looked like a rifle.
Frightened and somewhat entranced by the pandemonium outside, the 3 men remained on the 5th floor for several minutes. Meanwhile, the apparent assassin upstairs was now in a race against time.
Did you hear anything upstairs at all?
No, sir. I didn't hear anything.
Any footsteps?
No, sir. Probably.
I feel like anytime they put black in brackets on these testimonies, I feel like they're saying a different thing. Am I wrong for that? Like, I feel like they're not saying black. They're saying something different. So that's why it's black in brackets. You know what I mean?
The reason we didn't hear anything is because, you know, after the shots, we were running too, and that was making a louder noise.
Why didn't you go up to the 6th floor?
I really don't know. We just never did think about it. Maybe it's because we were frightened.
To be fair, it's the 60s in fucking Dallas. You know what I mean? They're not speaking Spanish, but they might be using the Spanish word for it. Hey,
when the shooting began, motorcycle policeman Marion Baker had just made a right turn from Main Street to Houston. Baker recognized the explosions as gunfire and could see a flock of pigeons fluttering above 2 buildings further up ahead. Baker made a split-second decision and headed for the book depository. Once inside, he was greeted by Roy Truly. Truly directed Baker to the elevators, but neither was available. He pressed the button while shouting up the elevator shaft for someone upstairs to close the gate. No response. Instead, they began running up the stairs.
As I came out to the 2nd floor there, Mr. Truly was ahead of me, and as I come out, I was kind of scanning, you know, the rooms, and I caught a glimpse of this man walking away from this. I happened to see him through this window in this door. I don't know how come I saw him, but I had a glimpse of him coming down there.
Where was he coming from, do you know?
No, sir. All I seen of him was a glimpse of him go away from me.
What did you do?
I hollered at him at that time and said, "Come here." He turned and walked right straight back to me.
What did you say to him?
I didn't get anything out of him. Mr. Truly had come up to my side here, and I turned to Mr. Truly and I says, "Do you know this man? Does he work here?" And he said, "Yes." And I turned immediately and went on out up the stairs.
The man whom Baker and Truly encountered in the 2nd floor lunchroom was none other than Lee Harvey Oswald. The encounter was brief, lasting no more than 30 seconds. Oswald appeared calm and failed to evoke suspicion, so Truly and Baker left him in the lunchroom and proceeded up the stairs.
So we arrested every black guy in the building.
They spent some time searching the roof, but there was no assassin to be found. Down by the main entrance, Geraldine Reed was still trying to process what had just occurred. She decided to return to her office on the 2nd floor of the building. Here, about 2 minutes after the shooting, Reed became the last known person to have seen Oswald inside the book depository.
I kept walking and I looked up and Oswald was coming in the back door of the office. I met him by the time I passed my desk by several feet, and I told him, I said, "Oh, the president has been shot, but maybe they didn't hit him." He mumbled something to me. I kept walking. He did too. I didn't pay any attention to what he said because I had no thoughts of him having any connection with the shooting at all, because he was very calm.
Oswald is then presumed to have taken the front stairs and, on his way out the main entrance, encountered someone looking for a phone. There are at least 2 candidates for who this person might have been, but Oswald seems to have pointed out the phone inside the building before blending into the chaos outside. He was next observed boarding a bus a few blocks east on Elm. Nearly 4 months after the assassination, Truly and Baker participated in a crude reconstruction of the shooting to time their movements. The experiment was repeated twice. On the first attempt, it took them 1 minute and 30 seconds to reach the second-floor lunchroom. Then, 1 minute and 15 seconds. These time trials were primarily conducted to determine whether Oswald could have fired the shots from the 6th floor and still made it down to the second in time for his encounter with Truly and Baker. After all, if there wasn't enough time, Oswald could not have been the assassin. A bunch of different routes were tested, and while Oswald could theoretically have taken one of the elevators or even the fire escape, in practice there wasn't enough time.
You do not think the assassin used any of the elevators at any time to get from the 6th to the 2nd floor?
You mean he just could not? Because those elevators, I saw myself, were both on the 5th floor. They were both even.
The only other means of descent was the stairway. A stand-in for the gunman trotted down from the 6th floor to the 2nd in 1 minute and 18 seconds. Then, at a slightly faster pace, in 1 minute and 14 seconds. There was just enough time. It's therefore possible that Oswald stopped on the 2nd floor, perhaps upon hearing Truly shouting up the elevator shaft, and attempted to hide in the lunchroom mere seconds ahead of Truly and Baker's arrival. But it's not quite that simple, because Oswald was not the only person using the stairway to escape the building. As previously mentioned, Victoria Adams watched the motorcade from an office on the 4th floor of the Book Depository. Within 30 seconds of the shooting, Adams ran down the stairs to the 1st floor along with her colleague, Sandra Stiles.
When you got to the bottom of the 1st floor, did you see anyone there as you entered the 1st floor from the stairway?
Yes, sir.
He had insane cardio because he was using a under-the-desk treadmill to control his heartbeat, ensuring that his active heart rate was very low, even when he was running down the stairs, you know what I mean?
Who did you see?
Mr. William Shelley and Billy Lovelady.
Now, what did you do after you encountered Mr. Shelley and Mr. Lovelady?
I said I believed the president was shot.
Do you remember what they said?
Nothing.
Then what did you do?
I proceeded out to the Houston Street dock.
There are 2 significant problems with Adams' account. The first being that she and Stiles supposedly left the 4th floor within 30 seconds of the shooting and then ran down the stairs to the 1st. This would place them in approximate sync with Oswald, descending from the 6th floor to the 2nd.
Now, as you were running down the stairs, did you encounter anyone?
Not during the actual running down the stairs, no, sir.
Did you hear anyone using the stairs?
No, sir.
But okay, perhaps Oswald was a few flights above, and his footsteps were drowned out by their own. This would mean that Stiles and Adams left the 4th floor mere seconds ahead of Oswald's arrival, reached the ground floor mere seconds ahead of Roy Truly and Marion Baker's ascent, before encountering William Shelley and Billy Lovelady right about here. But this is when problem number 2 makes an entrance. When the president was shot, Shelley and Lovelady stood on the front steps of the Book Depository. They spent several minutes roaming about outside before returning to the building. And that's the problem. How did Stiles and Adams encounter Shelley and Lovelady within seconds of the shooting if it took them several minutes to return to the building?
Who did you see on the 1st floor after returning to the Book Depository?
I saw a girl, but I wouldn't swear to it. It's Vicky.
What is her full name?
I wouldn't know.
Vicky Adams?
I believe so.
Would you say it was Vicky you saw?
I couldn't swear.
Where was the girl?
I don't remember what place she was, but I remember seeing a girl and she was talking to Shelley or saw Shelley or something.
Shelley could recall no such incident. Presuming that Lovelady was correct and Shelley had a lapse of memory, it's possible their encounter with Stiles and Adams occurred minutes rather than seconds after the shooting. After all, Adams could have been mistaken. This scenario implies that Oswald made his escape, Trulian Baker went upstairs, and then several minutes later, Stiles and Adams left the building. But it's not quite that simple. Watching the motorcade alongside Stiles and Adams was their supervisor, Dorothy Garner.
Miss Garner stated this morning that after Miss Adams went downstairs, Miss Garner, saw Mr. Truly and the policeman come up.
Not only does this account corroborate that of Adams, meaning they left within seconds, not minutes, but it implies that Garner was in a position to observe the stairway from somewhere on the 4th floor. In spite of this, Garner made no mention of seeing Oswald scampering down the stairs between Stiles and Adams' departure and Truly and Baker's arrival. What makes this conflict so difficult to resolve is that neither Stiles nor Garner were called to testify. We have but a few brief statements of what they witnessed. All we know about Sandra Stiles is that she went down the stairs with Adams. Did it happen within seconds of the shooting? We don't know. Did she see or hear anyone else while running down the stairs? We don't know. Did she encounter Shelley and Lovelady on the 1st floor? We don't know. Authorities appear to have presumed Adams unreliable and then ignored the witnesses who could have easily refuted or confirmed that presumption. A simple reenactment like the one granted Truly and Baker could have gone a long way to resolve this issue. But that never happened. Many decades after the assassination, author Barry Ernest was able to track down Sandra Stiles, Dorothy Garner, and Victoria Adams. Stiles confirmed that she and Adams left the window within seconds of the shooting, but she doesn't explicitly say they left the 4th floor within seconds. In any case, as they moved quickly down the stairs, she heard no footfall apart from their own. Garner confirmed she never witnessed the descent of Oswald, despite seeing Truly and Baker heading upstairs. Adams went a bit further and accused investigators of tampering with their testimony.
I'm beginning to wonder if the Shelley and Lovelady encounter was inserted into my testimony later. I remember saying to a fairly big black man inside the building, right near the loading dock, right after I got down the stairs, that I thought the president may have been shot.
Sandra Stiles apparently told Ernest something similar.
A few people were milling around on the 1st floor. One was a black man. Shelley and Lovelady were definitely not on the 1st floor when we got there.
The only black employees who could have possibly made it to the rear stairway in time were Carl Jones, Roy Lewis, Eddie Piper, and Troy West. What you see here are their approximate positions at the time of the shooting, but during the seconds and minutes that followed, only Piper is known to have paid any attention to the stairs in the back. As soon as the shooting began, Piper crossed the 1st floor to get a better view of a clock. He remained in roughly this location until he observed Truly and Baker running up the stairs.
Had anybody come down the steps before Truly and Baker went up the steps?
No, sir.
Did Vicky Adams come down before Truly and Baker went up the steps?
No, sir. No, sir. She didn't do it.
Remember James Romack and George Rackley? I mean, I wouldn't blame you if you don't, there's like 100 different names to keep track of, but they were the ones who failed to spot anyone leaving the book depository via the rear entrance for several minutes after the shooting. Well, the thing is, according to both Stiles and Adams, they left the book depository via the rear entrance upon reaching the 1st floor. So if Romack and Rackley are to be believed, then once again, the descent of Stiles and Adams must have taken place minutes rather than seconds after the shooting. Not only that, but when Sandra Stiles was contacted by another researcher, she apparently expressed great uncertainty regarding the stairwell descent and thought it might in fact have occurred a couple of minutes after the shooting. I don't know what to make of all this. The conspiracy crowd will, of course, amplify the more suspicious elements, while those who support the official narrative will focus on that which discredits Adams.
I'm sorry, this video's bullshit. No mention of the Umbrella Man, no mention of the Grassy Knoll, no mention of the Mafia connections. Yet, we're only 52 minutes in. There's a second half to this.
But ultimately, we don't know the exact timeline of events. It's difficult enough to pin down the minute by
I feel like Wendigoon did a better job.
minute chronology. Once you get down to seconds, there's a lot of guesswork at play. The time trials by Truly and Baker gives us a rough estimate, but
they mentioned the grassy knoll only to like immediately discount it. They said, like, a bunch of people said it was at the grassy knoll. Fuck. A bunch of people said that it was at the book depository, but nobody said 2 locations.
that's not cast in stone. They could have easily been a bit faster, a bit slower. So too could have Shelley, Lovelady, Garner, Stiles, Adams, and Oswald.
Would you say that the reconstruction that we did on March the 20th was a minimum or a maximum time?
Oh, I would say that would be the minimum time. We did everything that I did that day, and this would be the minimum time, because I'm sure that it took me a little longer.
I must also mention that we don't know much about the layout of the 4th floor beyond this crude schematic. If the other floors are any indication, much of this space was occupied by bookshelves and tall stacks of boxes. This is significant because Dorothy Garner never actually saw Stiles and Adams enter the stairway. She only heard footsteps of what she presumed to be them running down the stairs.
Yeah, I think this only focuses on, as the title suggests, the book depository aspect, and there probably will be additional videos on this assassination as well.
Following a quick sweep of the roof, Roy Truly and Marion Baker returned to the ground floor of the book depository.
What did you do when you got back to the 1st floor, or what did you see?
When I got back to the 1st floor, at first I didn't see anything except officers running around, reporters in the place. There was a regular madhouse.
Had they sealed off the building yet, do you know?
I am sure they had.
Then what?
Then, in a few minutes, it could have been moments or minutes at a time like that, I noticed some of my boys were over in the west corner of the shipping department, and there were several officers over there taking their names and addresses and so forth. I noticed that Lee Oswald was not among these boys.
Oswald was not the only absentee, but he was the only one whom Truly knew for a fact had left the building after the shooting. Meanwhile, on the 6th floor, a stack of boxes in the southeast corner attracted the attention of Deputy Luke Mooney.
I went straight across to the southeast corner of the building, and I saw these high boxes, and the minute I squeezed between these 2 stacks of boxes, I had to turn myself sideways to get in there. That is when I saw the expended shells, and the boxes that were stacked up looked to be a rest for the weapon.
2 windows west of the sniper's nest, authorities found a bottle of Dr. Pepper and some chicken bones, leftovers from the lunch eaten by Bonnie Williams shortly before the assassination. But according to some officers, including Mooney, remains of a similar meal were also found in the sniper's nest.
Does this photograph show any place where you saw the chicken bone?
If I recall correctly, the chicken bone could have been laying on this box, or it might have been laying on this box right here. There was one of them partially eaten, and there was a little small paper poke.
Official bad bitch lunch. Yeah, this is girlie's dinner, dude.
By poke, you mean a paper sack?
Right. The assassin could just maybe take one step and lay it over there, if he was the one that put it there.
In spite of this, no such items were ever photographed. Apart from the sack of chicken bones found here, there are no records of leftovers being recovered from anywhere else near the sniper's nest.
Girl dinner.
Now, did you see a chicken bone over near the boxes in the southeast corner?
I don't believe there was one there.
You didn't see any. One witness, a deputy sheriff named Luke Mooney, said he found a piece of chicken partly eaten on top of one of the boxes. Did you see anything like that?
No.
Was anything like that called to your attention?
I can't recall anything like that.
But it wasn't just the chicken bones. There were similar disagreements regarding the 3 cartridge cases. According to Mooney, Dallas Police Captain William Fritz tampered with the evidence.
Are those the empty shells you found?
Yes, sir.
Now, will you take this marker and encircle the shells?
All right.
They were turned over to Captain Fritz?
Yes, sir. He was the first officer that picked him up, as far as I know, because I stood there and watched him go over and pick him up and look at him.
Is this the position of the cartridges, as shown in this photograph, as you saw them?
Yes, sir. That is just about the way they were laying. To the best of my knowledge, I do know there was one further away, and these other two were relatively close to each other on this particular area. But these cartridges, this one and this one, looks like they are further apart than they actually was.
Now, I didn't quite understand. Did you say that it was your memory that A and B were not that close together?
Just from my memory, it seems that this cartridge ought to have been over this way a little further.
You mean the B cartridge should be closer to the C?
Closer to the C, yes, sir.
Mooney did not explicitly state, but strongly implied that Captain Fritz moved at least one of the cartridge cases before they were photographed. According to Fritz, he did everything by the book.
I told him not to move the cartridges, not to touch anything till we could get the crime lab to take pictures of them, just as they were lying there. And I left an officer assigned there to see that that was done. And the crime lab came almost immediately and took pictures and dusted the shells for prints.
Amidst the swarm of officers canvassing the 6th floor was a lone journalist by the name of Thomas Ollier. Ollier was equipped with a camera and actually filmed much of the frantic search effort. About 3 decades later, Ollier made some rather startling claims that were largely consistent with, but also expanded upon those made by Mooney.
After filming the casings, I asked Captain Fritz, who was standing at my side, if I could go behind the barricade and get a close-up shot of the casings. He told me that it would be better if I got my shots from outside the barricade. He then rounded the pile of boxes and entered the enclosure. This was the first time anybody walked between the barricade and the windows. Fritz then walked to the casings, picked them up, and held them in his hand over the top of the boxes for me to get a close-up shot of the evidence. I filmed about 8 seconds of a close-up shot of the shell casings in Captain Fritz's hand.
While these alleged portions of Ollier's film have never surfaced, preservation took a back seat while the film was being prepared for broadcast. Portions of the film were carelessly chopped up and discarded, and fragmentary clips are all that remains today.
That's
in any
insane.
case, after supposedly filming the casings in the hand of Captain Fritz, Ollier recalled how they were deceitfully returned to the floor.
Over 30 minutes later, Captain Fritz reached into his pocket.
It makes sense. Just like sloppy editing job. They don't give a fuck. Not considering it to be like important to the investigation later down the line. I don't think that part is like CIA.
And handed the casings to Detective Robert Studebaker. Studebaker never saw the original placement of the casings, so he tossed them on the floor and photographed them.
To counterbalance these allegations of foul play, I must also mention that there were those who found nothing amiss about the cartridge cases.
Did you see a picture taken of the holes?
Yes, sir.
When the picture was taken, were the holes in the same position as when you had first seen them?
Yes, sir, they were.
Even Mooney sort of agreed that the casings had not been moved, immediately after explaining that they had been moved. In the testimony we heard a few minutes ago, Mooney was shown this photograph. He then examined this one, taken from a different angle, before being shown this one. Now, these two are just differently cropped copies of the same photograph.
I have another picture. Here is a picture taken, also from another angle. Does that show the cartridges?
Yes, sir.
Now, compare that with the other photograph.
Yes, sir.
Is that about the way it looked?
I just don't understand why the shell casings being possibly moved makes, like, why, what is the relevance to this? Because, like, when you're shooting, when you're firing a gun, it can fly in any which direction. I don't know why this would be super relevant. No. Arguing they were planted. I guess. But like, a couple things. It can fly in any which direction. And also, he could have accidentally kicked it. Could have rolled over. Does that make sense? Like, bro, sometimes that shit like flies into your shirt, okay? I mean, obviously, I've never shot this particular rifle. But, so I don't know. I don't know how, like, it's bolt action. But I have shot bolt action rifles. Cartridges can fly in any which direction. Can fall literally on you. You know what I mean? Shit's hot. No, they can't. There's a hole sat in the FBI for ballistics. They train to recognize ejection patterns. You can predict it, dum-dum. I guess.
Yes, sir. That is right. It sure is.
That doesn't really gel with the casing supposedly being picked up and haphazardly tossed back on the floor, as Thomas Ollier would claim decades later. While there are question marks surrounding the chicken bones and cartridge cases, there can be no doubt.
Cartridge ejects up and to the right. It can be tossed within a few feet of you if you're really going at it. It was literally an army sniper. Yeah, well, that tracks with what I'm saying, right? You're not saying I'm wrong. That's what I'm saying. You can map out a trajectory for where the casings goes, but ultimately when you're shooting a rifle, it can still, as long as it's going towards your right, it can still be right next to you. It can fly away, further away. It's just also entirely dependent on, I guess, how fast you pull, right?
That some of the boxes in the sniper's nest
it's not
were
consistent.
moved prior to being photographed.
Do you have any pictures of the boxes near the window before they were moved, other than those you have showed me?
Just these two.
Then you don't have any pictures taken of the boxes before they were moved?
No.
Now, I will show you another picture. Was that taken by you?
Yes.
Does that show the position of the boxes before or after they were moved?
That's after they were dusted. There's fingerprint dust on every.
The implication is that there were no casings there and the guy planted them. That's why he didn't let them film. When they were there, he picked them up. Oh.
Box.
And they were not in that position then when you first saw them?
No.
Several minutes after the sniper's nest was discovered, a bolt-action rifle was found between two rows of boxes near the stairway.
Why? When I talk, can I stop walking? Why? Are you upset that I'm breathing a little bit? Like, is that what it is? So odd.
Now, there was some initial confusion regarding its make and model. Some thought it looked like a Mauser, but upon closer inspection, it was identified as an Italian Carcano. The officer who misidentified the rifle later explained that he did so at a glance. However, over a decade after the assassination in 1976, a former deputy sheriff by the name of Roger Craig claimed to have seen the marking 7.65 Mauser stamped right on the barrel of the rifle. To some, this is evidence that a Mauser was in fact discovered on the 6th floor before being swapped for a Carcano. But Craig was the only person to make this specific claim, did so many years after the assassination, and after telling a journalist the following.
Did you handle that rifle on the 6th floor?
Yes, I did. I couldn't give its name because I don't know foreign rifles. I know it was foreign made, and you loaded it downward into a built-in clip. But there was another rifle, a Mauser, found up on the roof of the depository that afternoon.
What?
There were no reports of a Mauser being found on the roof either.
No.
Besides, the only rifle seen in the film taken by Thomas Ollier is unmistakably a Carcano. Unique markings on the cartridge cases would later prove that this was indeed the rifle from which all three had been fired. Before the day was over, the rifle had been traced to a company in Chicago, Illinois. The company had sold the rifle to someone named A. Hidell and shipped it to a post office box in Dallas in early 1963.
A. Hidell, more like a Fidel Castro. Dun dun dun.
James Hidell was a pseudonym known to have been used by Oswald. So there was now a direct link between the shells, the rifle, and Oswald. Not only that, but Oswald's prints were lifted from both the rifle and boxes in the sniper's nest. Apart from the spent shells and the rifle, authorities discovered one other key piece of evidence.
Did you find anything else up in the southeast corner of the 6th floor?
Yes, sir. We found this brown paper sack, or case. It was made out of heavy wrapping paper. Actually, it looked similar to the paper that those books in the building was wrapped in. It was just a long, narrow paper bag.
The bag was alleged to have been found here. yet this space is suspiciously empty in all the crime scene photographs.
How long was the paper bag, approximately?
I don't know. I picked it up and dusted it for prints, and they took it down there and sent it to Washington. And that's the last I'd seen of it, and I don't know.
Did you take a picture of it before you picked it up?
No.
Does that sack show in any of the pictures you took?
No, it doesn't show in any of the pictures.
Detective Robert Studebaker, who'd been working as a forensic assistant for less than 2 months, neglected to explain why he never photographed the bag. In Studebaker's defense, no one was on the lookout for a brown paper bag. Assassin, sure, rifle, casings absolutely, but some debris in a dark-lit corner of the room. It wasn't until the bag was picked up and inspected that its significance became apparent.
Do you remember anything about what the sack looked like?
Well, it was assumed at the time that it was the sack that the rifle was wrapped up in when it was brought into the building, and it appeared that it could have been used for that.
Now, as you may recall, Wesley Frazier drove Oswald back to Irving on November the 21st to pick up some curtain rods. The following morning, Oswald was seen carrying a package by both Frazier and his sister, Linnie Randall. According to
that was brisk 30-minute walk at a 3 kilometers an hour pace, and my heart rate was around 113. Nice little walk, you know. You got to get that in. Calorie wise, no, it's not 4 calories. I'm a big boy, chat, so it's definitely a lot more than you would suspect. So far today on my move, I've hit a new exercise record today, 113 exercise minutes total. But as far as my, I want all these fucking medals, man. So far I've spent I've burned 1,175 calories out of my daily goal, which is 750 calories. So I'm above it by 156%. My exercise calories, or my exercise minutes have been 113 minutes, and I've stood for 8 hours, totaling 4,637 steps, 0.27 miles the whole day. My last indoor walk was 30 minutes long, and I went for 0.74 miles, and I burned 251 total calories in that time frame, with the average heart rate being 116 BPM. And active calories were burned at 178. Brother, are you cows screaming? 8 hours? No. Not that bad. It's got to be miles per hour, not kilometers. Well, I was on a 3 on the fucking treadmill, and I only did, in half an hour, I only did 0.74 miles, so. Let's continue.
To Frazier, Oswald told him the package contained curtain rods.
Oh, yeah, stand hours are deceiving. It just means I stood at least a minute every hour for 8 hours, yeah. It doesn't mean I was standing for 8 hours straight.
Which you then brought back to Dallas. But you may also recall that Jack Doherty denied seeing such a package.
Did you see Oswald come to...
Someone tell me why Hasan's doing all this. I noticed him walking on a treadmill in recent videos to be less sedentary.
Work that morning?
Yes, when he first came into the door.
Did he have anything in his hands or arms?
Well, not that I could see of.
The thing is, Doherty was not a reliable witness. When questioned by the FBI and Secret Service, he appeared very confused about times and places. He required assistance from his father due to considerable difficulty in coordinating his mental faculties with his speech. While Doherty denied having such issues, his testimony is nonetheless riddled with contradictions.
Wait a minute, did you go to lunch?
Well, I went back downstairs to eat lunch. Yes, sir.
What time?
Oh, it was 12 o'clock.
Wait a minute, did you hear the shots before or after your lunch?
Before I ate my lunch.
You heard shots before you ate your lunch?
Let's see. Yes, I believe I did.
Now, did you hear a shot either before or after lunch?
It was before lunch. It was before lunch.
You think it was before lunch you heard the shot?
I believe it was. Yes, sir.
My man was just hungry, bro. Let him fucking live, you know what I mean?
While Doherty
He doesn't know any
insisted that
better.
Oswald had nothing in his hands when he arrived at work, it turned out that this certitude was based on nothing but a glance.
Now, is that a very definite impression that you saw Oswald that morning when he came to work?
Well, it's like this. I'll try to explain it to you this way. You see, I was sitting on the wrapping table, and when he came in the door, I just caught him out of the corner of my eye.
Given that Frazier had eyes on Oswald for several minutes, the weight of evidence suggests he
Right back after lunch, after seeing Oswald get assassinated, normal time to eat.
carried a package to work on the morning of November the 22nd. A far more contentious question is whether the package carried by Oswald was the same as the brown paper bag discovered on the 6th floor. According to both Randall and Frazier, the only two witnesses known to have seen the package, the answer was a definite no.
Now, was the length of the package any similar to the bag? Anywhere near similar?
Well, it wasn't that long. I mean, it was folded down at the top, as I told you. It definitely wasn't that long.
I told the FBI that as far as the length of the bag, I told them that was entirely too long.
Their main source of contention was that the package carried by Oswald was shorter than the brown paper bag. The bag was just long enough to store the rifle in its disassembled state, so if the package carried by Oswald was much shorter, then it could not.
Is the Zapruder film against the Twitch terms of service? The Zapruder film is probably against Twitch terms of service, but it also fails the Bechdel test. So I will not be watching. The only type of stuff that I watch is content that does not fail the Bechdel test. So, fun fact: 9/11 does not fail the Bechdel test. So that's why we watch 9/11 footage here.
Have contained the rifle. Except Randall saw it briefly at a distance through a window, while Frazier never paid it much attention.
Did it look to you as if there was something heavy in the package?
Well, I'll be frank with you, I didn't pay much attention to the package.
In fact, the length of the package seemed about as certain to Frazier as his lack of attention to it.
I didn't pay much attention. I didn't pay too much attention. I didn't pay any attention to it. I didn't pay much attention to the package. I didn't look at the package very much. Like I say, I didn't pay that much
God damn, bro. Okay, when you say it like that, we get it.
attention to it. I didn't pay too much attention to how he carried the package at all.
The tape and paper with which the brown paper bag had been constructed matched the tape and paper used to wrap books for shipping on the first floor of the book depository. Not only that, but a fingerprint and palm print matching that of Oswald were also found on the bag. In spite of all this, some authors refused to accept that the brown paper bag and the package carried by Oswald were one and the same. Instead, the argument tends to be that the bag was fabricated by authorities in an effort to frame Oswald. But you then have to square that against no curtain rods being found inside the book depository, Oswald already having curtains in his rented room in Dallas, him failing to obtain permission from his landlady to redecorate, him supposedly being in such urgent need of curtain rods that he just had to return to Irving on Thursday instead of waiting just one more day, him neglecting to mention anything about curtain rods to his wife and Ruth Payne upon his arrival, and that's despite the fact that Payne actually had some spare curtain rods in her garage. The same garage where Oswald stored his rifle.
How did you learn of the shooting of President Kennedy?
I was watching television and Ruth said someone had shot at the president.
What did you say?
It was hard for me to say anything. We both turned pale. I went to my room and cried.
Did you think immediately that your husband might have been involved?
No.
Did the possibility of your husband being involved?
No, but she only said that, by the way, they fired from the building in which Lee is working. My heart dropped. I then went to the garage to see whether the rifle was there, and I saw that the blanket was still there, and I said, thank God.
Did you look in the blanket to see if the rifle was there?
I didn't unroll the blanket. It was in its usual position, and it appeared to have something inside.
When did you learn that the rifle was not in the blanket?
When the police arrived and asked whether my husband had a rifle, and I said yes.
Then what happened?
They began to search the apartment. When they came to the garage and took the blanket, I thought, well, now they will find it. They opened the blanket, but there was no rifle there.
Around the time of the rifle's discovery on the 6th floor of the book depository, Captain William Fritz was appraised of Oswald's absence.
Playing Steam Deck during the film? No. I saw some fucking sumo game that Moon Moon was playing and immediately downloaded it.
Fritz immediately left the building and returned to police headquarters.
We were standing in the hallway when Captain Fritz walked in. He walked up to my colleagues and made the statement to them, "Go get a search warrant and pick up a man named Lee Oswald." And I asked the captain why he wanted him, and he said, well, he was employed down at the book depository, and he had not been present for a roll call of employees. And we said, "Captain, we will save you a trip, because there he sits."
After escaping the book depository, Oswald boarded a bus right about here. But
Revenant
the assassination
2?
ground
Wait, what do you
traffic to a
mean?
halt, so Oswald soon left the bus and hailed a cab. After returning to his rooming house in Oak Cliff, a neighborhood in southwestern Dallas, Oswald changed his clothes, grabbed a gun, and left in a hurry.
I don't know what Remnant 2 is. No, I'm talking about Morodoshi Sumo.
78. 78. You are in the Oak Cliff area, are you not? Line to nose. You will be at large for the emergency that comes in. Telephone.
Police patrolman J.D. Tippett encountered Oswald some 45 minutes after the shooting, a bit further south, right about here. As soon as Tippett stepped out of the vehicle, Oswald drew his gun and fired 4 shots in rapid succession.
Hello, police operator. Go ahead, Assassination News. Hello, we've had a shooting out here. Where is it at? Between Marsalis and Buckley. It's a police officer. Somebody shot him. What's this? 404 10th Street. 78. It's in a police car. Notify one that the officer involved in the shooting, which is Officer J.D. Tippett, we believe, was pronounced DOA at Methodist 128. Well, any indication that it has any connection with this other shooting? Well, the descriptions on the suspects are similar, and it is possible.
Oswald was then caught sneaking into a nearby movie theater without purchasing a ticket.
I have information that a suspect just went in the Texas theater on West Jefferson. Simple.
A large contingent of officers descended upon the theater. They surrounded the building, switched on the lights, and approached the suspect. Flanked by officers, Oswald drew a gun and a brief scuffle ensued. But this time he was quickly subdued, handcuffed, and taken to police headquarters back in downtown Dallas.
Meet Barbenheimer. He didn't do nothing
Over the
wrong.
next
He
2
just wanted to
days,
see
between
it.
his arrest and untimely death, Lee Harvey Oswald was interrogated by members of the Dallas Police, FBI, Secret Service, among others. None of it was recorded.
Did you have any tape recorders?
No, sir. I don't have a tape recorder. We need one. If we had one at this time, we could have handled these conversations far better.
The Dallas Police Department doesn't have one.
No, sir. I have requested one several times, but so far, they haven't got me one.
So, no one knows exactly what was said inside this room. Instead, we have to settle for the cliff notes. And of especial interest to us is Oswald's alibi.
These people have given me a hearing without legal representation or anything.
Did you shoot the president?
I didn't shoot anybody, no, sir.
You just said. Oswald, who said he did not shoot anybody.
Oswald vehemently denied any involvement in the assassination. Instead, he claimed to have eaten lunch with 2 co-workers on the 1st floor of the book depository. One of them was a black...
They didn't record the interrogation of someone who supposedly assassinated the president. No JCS React Lord, dude. I thought it was, for a second I got scared. I thought it was the not like him getting out of the interrogation. I thought it was like when they're...
co-worker whose name Oswald could not recall. The other was James Jarman.
Were you with anybody when you were walking around on the 1st floor finishing your sandwich?
No, I wasn't. I was trying to get through so I could get out on the street.
Did you see Lee Oswald?
No, I didn't.
After his arrest, he stated to a police officer that he had had lunch with you. Did you have a lunch with him?
No, sir, I didn't.
But according to another interrogator, Oswald's claim was not to have eaten lunch with Jarman and this unnamed co-worker, but merely that he saw them pass through the lunchroom while he was eating.
Oswald stated that he had eaten lunch in the lunchroom at the Texas School Book Depository alone, but recalled possibly 2 black employees walking through the room during this period. He stated possibly one of these employees was called...
I don't get, like, it doesn't matter if recording interrogations is not normal at the time. It seems insane to me that they wouldn't record this interrogation. He is, like, the most viable suspect. He fits numerous eyewitness profiles. They fucking can't find his gun in his house. They find a gun that is connected to his other name, like his alter ego or whatever the fuck. Like, you know, the media has recorders. Everybody has recorders. His alias, not alter ego. Shut up. I'm ESL. Fuck you, okay? I'm ESL. I lived in Russia, and that's suspicious.
Jr., and the other was a short individual whose name he could not recall, but whom he would be able to recognize.
So, according to this version of events, Oswald's alibi was that he possibly saw 2 co-workers, one whose name he could not recall, enter and traverse the lunchroom, together or separately, during an unspecified period of time. Whether Oswald claimed to have eaten lunch with or in proximity of his colleagues, it makes no difference because neither alibi could be substantiated. Instead, James Jarman had last seen Oswald taking an elevator upstairs sometime between 11:30 and 12 o'clock. William Shelley and Eddie Piper had last seen Oswald roaming about the first floor around noon, at which time Oswald had told Piper that he was either going out or going up to eat lunch. Then there's the account of Charles Givens. You may recall that Givens is officially recognized as the last person inside the book depository known to have seen Oswald before the assassination. Their encounter was fixed at 11:55 and is supposed to have taken place on the 6th floor. But prior to relating this version of events, Givens had reportedly told the FBI that he saw Oswald on the 1st floor at 11:50, a statement which he later denied ever making. Either way, Oswald being on the 1st floor at noon does absolutely nothing to prevent him from being on the 6th, half an hour later. Unless Carolyn Arnold is to be believed.
As Mrs. Arnold was standing in front of the building, she stated she thought she caught a fleeting glimpse of Lee Harvey Oswald standing in the hallway between the front door and the double doors leading to the warehouse located on the 1st floor. She could not be sure that this was Oswald, but she said she felt it was and believed the time to be a few minutes before 12:15 p.m.
So that would be about here. In a subsequent statement, Arnold claimed to have gone outside as late as 12:25, thereby pushing the time of her potential ground floor sighting of Oswald as close as 5 minutes before the shooting. Putting aside the fact that her observation was described as a fleeting glimpse and that she could not be certain of the man's identity, Arnold herself will later deny it ever happened.
That is completely foreign to me. It would have forced me to have been turning back around to the building when, in fact, I was trying to watch the parade. Why would I be looking back inside the building? That doesn't make any sense to me.
Instead, Arnold claimed that this encounter had actually taken place in the 2nd floor lunchroom.
I do not recall that Oswald was doing anything. I just recall that he was sitting there in one of the booth seats on the right-hand side of the room as you go in. He was alone, as usual, and appeared to be having lunch. I did not speak to him, but I recognized him clearly.
The problem with both of these accounts is that none of her colleagues reported anything remotely similar. Whether it was the 1st or 2nd floor, Oswald was apparently invisible to everyone but Arnold. Besides, it took Arnold 15 years to relate her revised version of events. Not ideal for such a time-sensitive issue. That being said, depending on what conspiracy theory you're willing to entertain, there are ways to interpret what Oswald told his interrogators so that it aligns with either one of Arnold's accounts.
Bro, this is one half of an Oppenheimer flick. Like, it's crazy. I don't know. I feel like the pacing would be a little bit faster.
Take this one, for instance.
Oswald stated he was
starting to get
for
tired.
work at the book depository on the morning of November the 22nd, and at noon went to lunch. He went to the 2nd floor to get a Coca-Cola and returned to the 1st floor to eat lunch. Then he went outside to watch the presidential...
I just remembered, isn't he free, like in house arrest currently? No, he's dead. Spoiler alert. Dead. He got killed shortly after. while in police custody. You're thinking of you're thinking of the other Kennedy, and who also had mysterious circumstances about his assassination by Sirhan, who is free now. Yes. There were certainly other Kennedys that also died under mysterious circumstances.
Parade.
This claim is interesting because in the early days of the assassination, it appeared to be supported by photographic evidence. But this figure was quickly identified as Billy Lovelady, a man who bore such a close resemblance to Oswald that when footage of Oswald first appeared on television, Lovelady's stepchildren thought it was him. Now, speaking only for myself here, really? Am I missing something here? Because they're not exactly doppelgangers, right? Anyway, in recent years, another such figure, this time with even fewer pixels to work with, has once...
Anti-white racism, brother, that's what it is. It's just like classic, many such cases. That's what happened there.
Again, been the subject of debate. Because this much of a person can't be positively identified, some believe it, therefore, must be Oswald. On the other hand, Oswald explicitly denied watching the motorcade when he spoke with another interrogator, not to mention that his presence outside went completely unnoticed.
Oh, not Sirhan. Hinckley. That's the one who got out. You're right. Sirhan was slated to be released. The guy who shot Reagan. Now, of course, in my opinion, you keep him in there. You know what I mean? Because when you come at the king, you best not miss, or use a 22. And Hinckley, of course, unfortunately failed.
By all those who did watch the motorcade. Now, there's one final account of Oswald's supposed alibi that stands out from the rest. It stands out because it really skirts the line of self-incrimination.
When asked as to his whereabouts at the time of the shooting, Oswald stated that when lunchtime came and he didn't say which floor he was on, he said one of the black employees invited him to eat lunch with him, and he stated, "You go on down and send the elevator back up and I will join you in a few minutes." Before he could finish whatever he was doing, he stated the commotion surrounding the assassination took place. And when he went downstairs, a policeman questioned him as to his identification, and his boss stated that he is one of our employees, whereupon the policeman had him step aside momentarily. Following this, he simply walked out the front door of the building.
If this is an accurate recollection of what Oswald said, he placed himself on a floor above the second at the time of the shooting. While he neglected to mention which floor, he described a conversation between himself and an unnamed black co-worker, which sounds remarkably similar to the one described by Charles Givens. This would mean that Oswald, seemingly by accident, placed himself on the 6th floor during the shooting. After that horribly confusing mishmash of stories, what have we learned? Well, Oswald appears to have contradicted himself by offering multiple alibis. It's also possible that what he said was misunderstood or otherwise misrepresented by the interrogation participants. As mentioned at the beginning of all this, we don't actually know what Oswald said. This is all based on second-hand accounts related days, weeks, or even months after the assassination. But the main takeaway has to be the lack of corroboration. With the exception of Carolyn Arnold, a highly unreliable witness, no one laid eyes on Oswald between roughly noon and the shooting. At least, no one inside the book Depository. Among those who witnessed the sniper in the sniper's nest, Howard Brennan was the only one who thought he could identify the gunman. At least, that's what he stated initially. Within a few hours of the shooting, Brennan had become far less certain.
Upon arrival at the police station, Mr. Brennan said, "I don't know if I can do you any good or not, because I've seen the man that they have under arrest on television. and he said, I just don't know whether I can identify him positively or not, because he said that the man on television was a bit disheveled and his shirt was open or something like that. And he said, the man I saw in the book Depository was not in that condition.
Brennan was then brought down to the basement of the police station to view a lineup of suspects. Among them was Oswald.
Mr. Brennan looked very carefully and he said, I cannot positively say. I said, well, is there anyone there that looks like the man in the book Depository? He said, well, that second man from the left, who was Oswald, he looks like him. Then he
like an Oscar is scab shit.
repeated that the man he saw in the book Depository was not disheveled.
So that's not ideal. While Brennan did pick Oswald from a lineup, that identification was far from certain. But if Brennan is to be believed, this uncertainty was not genuine, but merely an act intended to protect his family.
I believed at that time, and I still believe, the assassination was a communist activity. And I felt like there hadn't been more than one eyewitness. And if it got to be a known fact that I was an eyewitness, my family or I, either one, might not be safe.
Well, if you wouldn't have identified Oswald during the lineup, might he not have been released by the police?
No, I already knew they had the man for murder, and I knew he would not be released.
The murder of whom?
Of Officer J.D. Tippett.
Well, what happened in between to change your mind that you later decided to come forth and tell the FBI that you could identify him?
After Oswald was killed, I was relieved quite a bit that as far as pressure on myself of somebody not wanting me to identify anybody, there was no longer that immediate danger.
Mr. Brennan, could you tell us now whether you can or cannot positively identify the man you saw in the 6th floor window as the same man that you saw in the police station?
I could at that time. I could, with all sincerity, identify him as being the same man.
So, according to Brennan, within a few hours of the assassination, he'd become concerned that it...
Okay, bro, what the fuck? Are they just straight showing it? Are they... I mean, they don't have this footage anyway. It's got to be a reenactment, right? This is not the right angle.
It was the product of a communist conspiracy. He feared that should he attempt to identify the gunman, he could become a target and thereby endanger...
Oh, it says right underneath it is a reconstruction.
...his family.
Did you and your wife...
Yeah, I didn't think it was an actual lens, but I thought they put a lens effect on like the Zapruder film, but then I realized it's not the right angle.
Discuss any aspect of the assassination?
Unless it was fucking CIA footage that they found. They found the CIA footage, dude.
And you being present more or less at the scene of the assassination?
Yes, we discussed it. We talked. I talked of moving her and my grandson, who was living with us at that time, and my daughter, moving them out of town somewhere in secrecy. My wife seemed to think that a person can't get away wherever they go.
So when Brennan...
Which he doesn't even know how bad that gets with the internet, you know what I'm saying? Like where they even serve you a top of the hour ad break at the top of every hour, sometimes 8 minutes in because you forgot to run it at the top of the hour exactly. Just saying. Were they simultaneously claiming JFK was communist and that his assassin was a communist? Is the Zapruder film the first assassination of a world leader caught on film? No, probably not. Zapruder. Zapruder. Okay, I'm running the 3-minute ad break. Dude, I'm so fucking tired. Holy shit.
Brennan was brought down to view a lineup later that evening. He feigned uncertainty to protect his family. At least, so he claimed. I leave it up to you to decide whether to believe or disbelieve Brennan's story.
I don't think they will declassify JFK's assassination. I know I said something to that. I know I said something about that recently, but I don't believe it.
November the 24th, Oswald was scheduled for transfer from the city to the county jail. Reporting from outside the police station, a local news correspondent couldn't help but to jinx the whole shebang.
Now this is the armored truck that will carry Lee Harold Oswald from the basement here of Dallas Police Headquarters downtown to the Dallas County Sheriff's Office and the Dallas County Jail. Strict security precautions have been exercised from the very beginning and have been even increased this morning as fear arises and grows stronger that someone may attempt to take the life of the man accused of murdering the President of the United States.
Oh, they don't show it. They don't show it at all. It's odd. Here, look. Reporter pre-watch, dude. It's fucking nuts. Look, this man right here. Look alive! Thank you for protecting us. Yeah, thank you, Twitch, for protecting us from the scariness of history, which is right.
Lee Oswald has been shot.
The doctors at Parkland Hospital said that the single shot could scarcely have done more damage to a body than that shot did to Lee Harvey Oswald. It penetrated his spleen, his pancreas, the aorta, the kidney, and the liver.
Oswald expired at 1:07 p.m. He died at 1:07 p.m. We have arrested the man. The man will be charged with murder.
Who is he?
The suspect's name is Jack Rubenstein, I believe. He goes by the name of Jack Ruby. That's all I have to say.
Who was a more significant death in prison, Lee Harvey Oswald or Epstein? Ooh.
Throughout this video, we've encountered witnesses who not only contradicted each other, but also themselves. Central to many arguments of conspiracies that these contradictions represent attempts by the conspirators to conceal the truth. To give you an example, Charles Givens initially claimed to have seen Oswald on the first floor at 11:50. Then he denied ever saying that and claimed to have spoken with Oswald on the 6th floor at 11:55. Some authors have found this change a bit too convenient and suspected Givens was coerced to change his story by the conspirators. In support of that conclusion, we have this document in which Dallas Police Lieutenant Jack Revel said the following.
Lieutenant Revel stated that Givens had been previously handled by the Dallas Police Department on a marijuana charge, and he believes that Givens would change his story for money.
About 2 months later, Givens did precisely that. He changed his story. But let's have a think about this. According to this interpretation of events, the conspirators had free rein to dictate Givens' testimony. They could have told him what to say or perhaps rewritten his testimony after the fact. You may recall that that is precisely what Victoria Adams claimed and Carolyn Arnold implied earlier in the video, that someone had put words in their mouth by altering the written record. Okay, so wielding that near limitless power, what words did the conspirators choose to put in the mouth of Givens? Well, they supposedly invented a brief conversation about lunch in elevators away from the sniper's nest more than half an hour before the shooting. I guess I saw Oswald sitting in the sniper's nest, or even I saw Oswald carrying a large package heading for the sniper's nest, was a bit too on the nose. The same is of course true of every other witness in Dealey Plaza. Apart from the doubtful identification by Howard Brennan, no one could actually place Oswald in the sniper's nest at the time of the shooting. I really cannot stress this enough. It apparently did not occur to the conspirators to have at least one witness unambiguously identify Oswald as the assassin. Better yet, take a photograph. For all this talk of witness coercion and evidence tampering, that seems like a bit of an oversight. What I'm trying to illustrate is that it's surprisingly trivial to pluck a stray document here, an unfounded allegation there, and sprinkle in some thoughts about means and motive, and you'll end up with a conspiracy theory that, at least on the surface, sounds convincing. Whether it's organized crime, a foreign government, or domestic agency, there's enough material here to make a compelling case against countless groups and individuals, something upon which many authors, filmmakers, and others have capitalized to great success. I don't know if all of them are right or wrong. This video clearly doesn't cover enough ground for me to determine that. But to ascribe a conspiratorial motive to anything remotely suspicious seems irresponsibly black and white for a case so clouded by shades of gray. A person acting in a way that's unlawful, unethical, untruthful does not prove they colluded in a plot to assassinate the President of the United States. Such thrilling leaps of conspiracy make for entertaining stories, but that doesn't make them true. Remember Thomas Ollier? He was the journalist filming on the 6th floor during the initial search for the assassin. Decades later, Ollier began accusing officers of tampering with the evidence, staging photographs, and lying under oath. The veracity of those allegations aside, the fascinating thing about Ollier is that he never...
I think the most suspicious thing is that they picked up one white man in a building full of black men when it would have been so easy for them to do so, to go with like the regular order of business for the Dallas Police Department and be like, a black man must have done it. Is that what you mean? That tree line didn't look too concealing. Good line of sight. No, the tree line directly during the shot was interfering with his line of sight.
Believed Kennedy fell victim to a conspiracy. Ollier had a refreshingly nuanced take on the assassination by recognizing that evidence of corruption is not the same as evidence of conspiracy. Sloppy police work neither began nor ended with the Kennedy assassination, and people lie for all sorts of reasons. Loyalty, embarrassment, fear, pride, attention, power, money. There's no shortage of motivations to choose from. Besides, what kind of clueless masterminds would allow a cameraman to casually film their supposed cover-up? Something I found myself doing a lot while making this video was attempting to view the assassination from the perspective of the alleged conspiracy.
You're spreading misinformation? About what? By watching this? Is that what you're saying? The first shot missed, hit the streetlight crossing the pole, and ricocheted. The tree line didn't affect anything. I can't tell if this guy's like baiting or not.
You could, for instance, question the logic of placing an assassin in this specific window, a window in which he ran the risk of being caught red-handed by other workers inside the building, a window in which he could have easily been and actually was spotted by spectators in the approaching motorcade, a window from which his view was partially obstructed by a tree. You can also question the logic of using a sniper to shoot at a moving target in the first place, especially when that person had a tendency to stand still in very exposed public places. If Oswald acted alone and the assassination was a crime of opportunity, these less than ideal choices start to make a lot more sense. He found himself at the right place at the right time, had mere days to prepare, and used the only building to which he had access. But for a group of conspirators to handicap their own assassination plot requires a bit more ingenuity to explain. He was a patsy, he was supposed to get caught, there were multiple assassins, you know the drill. But there's so much of that in this case. So much had to go just right for a conspiracy and the subsequent cover-up to succeed. From the roundabout process by which Oswald was hired at the Book Depository to the selection of the motorcade route. From Oswald's narrow escape and subsequent arrest to him being given multiple chances to speak with the press.
You said not sure how much this tree line affects his visibility, but like it still does. First of all, I don't even know if this is from the same. I don't think this is from the same date, obviously. And also, you're showing me in like you could be showing me the fucking trees in the winter when they're significantly skinnier versus when it actually. This is Zoomer speak using social justice and therapy language on shit they barely know about. No, in the video that they're showing, it's a recreation. And I am saying he was on the tree. Yeah, he shot him from the tree. And then it ricocheted. Aya, get out of there. That's craziness. That's what is that? We have reached new. Okay, I have to explain something here. We've reached new puzzle moves. There is in a bag underneath my table. All of Kaya's puzzles are there. I didn't realize that some of those puzzles still had treats in them. Kaya went into the bag, picked one of the puzzles, picked the cap off the puzzle, carried the treat inside of the cap, dropped it over there, ate the treat, and now is just chewing on the puzzle piece. Actually insane. My favorite theory is the additional accidental shot from the car behind the recruit who was holding an AR without full metal jacket. The head explosion. The car lurches forward and he was getting up out of the seat. Okay, she's going back in there. Let's see. Going back in the bag. I'm going to pick up another. Wait, hold on. Being ridiculous right now. Being absolutely ridiculous.
From the supposed tampering, suppression, and planting of evidence to dozens of expert witnesses being successfully fooled or coaxed to lie on their oath. Not only would a plan as complex and prolonged as this one have been difficult to predict with countless points of failure, but it seems, and excuse my language here, a bit overkill. Yes, Kennedy was the President of the United States, but he was not exactly difficult to access. He was rather famous for abandoning his Secret Service detail and wandering off into crowds. In fact, that's precisely what he did on multiple occasions during this very trip.
Now decided to shake hands with one or two more people, but this is the moment where the Secret Service has its point of tension. They say, When the president stops moving, that's when we're concerned, because that is when the possibility of trouble comes to the forefront. This was one of those impromptu moments for which President Kennedy is so well known. So many times you have heard that the Secret Service men suddenly find themselves without the president, that suddenly he has left them and stepped into the crowd and decided to shake hands and give his personal greetings. You could say perhaps that this is more the norm now than the unexpected, because it has been done so many times.
As this news correspondent was alluding to just a few minutes before the actual shooting, all it takes is one person with a gun at point-blank range. Not unlike the shooting of Oswald. Think about that the next time you watch a documentary or read one of the thousands of books implicating members of the Secret Service, FBI, CIA, Dallas Police Department, politicians, lawyers, doctors, investigators, witnesses, and so forth. Think about how all these alleged co-conspirators did not have to be a part of any of this. Just one person in a crowd whose guilt is assured the moment they pull the trigger. By roping in this ensemble cast of characters, it inadvertently makes the conspirators seem clueless. I like to imagine a conference room, and up against the wall stands a board upon which they've mapped out the whole thing. All the people they need to manipulate, all the evidence they have to fabricate. The entire patchwork of needless risk-taking laid out bare.
I like that he's saying that. Whereas, like, in an effort to put together a conspiracy to kill fucking Kennedy in other circumstances, okay, you would have an infinitely larger number of eyewitnesses, so that would make it significantly more difficult to craft. You also do not have an accurate route of where he's going. In most other circumstances, when a president, regardless of what they're doing, is not going to go, the president, when he's doing like a speech or whatever, there's always it's going to be more difficult to execute something like that during a speech, because I feel like there's more Secret Service detail during a speech. I don't know. JFK wasn't even fucking assassinated. Trump decided to become president after meeting him in 2014. JFK and his son have been in witness protection for decades. Where we go one, we go all. The video is assuming the conspiracy has to be grand when it literally can be a CIA paying a guy to kill JFK and then killing him instead. You're wrong. JFK was infamously shitty at following security advice. Okay. Here's the issue. Being infamously shitty at following security advice still is completely up to JFK. So you can't plan an event around that. Whereas you can plan an event around a scheduled motorcade. You see what I'm saying? Like, you keep saying, oh, there's easier ways to kill him. Sure, but there aren't easier ways to schedule it if you are to put together like a scheduled event. I don't think he's actually carrying water for the CIA, even though like his take is that it's not a conspiracy and he just like kind of did that. I guess like he'll get into more details in more videos. I do think the CIA had Kennedy killed, but even if it was declassified and everyone knew it, it wouldn't change anything. Maybe a few Netflix docs and conspiracy theories would be vindicated, but in the end, everyone will move on. And like everyone else, everything else, people will think the government sucks, but what can I do? You're really clutching here. He talked about the haphazard way Oswald got that job and how the route was chosen. You have a video that's pro-conspiracy? There's so many. It's also the same CIA that used Looney Tunes as cigars against Castro and failed. Just because it's convoluted doesn't mean it's untrue. The case for CIA involvement revolves around Lee Harvey Oswald being a patsy or an asset for the CIA, possibly naval intelligence, and the CIA working a rogue unit under the CIA, or potentially the CIA working to assassinate JFK because of the Bay of Pigs, and also the JFK saying he was going to rip the CIA to bits and pieces. I disagree, actually. I think JFK being one of the most popular presidents personally killed by the CIA would definitely be a huge case legally and politically. It's not like the CIA is doing shit internationally. It's not like the CIA doing shit internationally. Oh, that's what you're saying. Stop guessing. You sound insane. Alan Dulles, the longest-standing and first civilian director of the CIA, was fired by Kennedy. He was also on the Warren Commission and that investigated Kennedy's assassination, also a corporate lawyer. So Oswald is a CIA asset that randomly gets a job at a bookstore 2 weeks before the route is even decided to go past the building. I mean, that part isn't that suspicious to me at all. I don't understand. Like, they say, oh, they haphazardly decided on that route, but I don't think presidential security detail makes decisions like that haphazardly. I just don't believe that. I think that they probably would arrange something like that ahead of time, knowing full well that that was going to happen in advance. I don't know why people immediately are like, oh yeah, that was a random route. Like, that seems off. If anything, him getting the job randomly, that is more suspicious. GDF did a video on the JFK assassination. JFK changed the route on the 18th, and it's documented, and it happened on the 22nd, and the guy had been working there for a while.